This is the Real Footy podcast. Coming up, it was a big finals shaping round with Collingwood still in free fall, Brisbane Lions settling down, and Adelaide just getting over the line against West Coast in Perth, while Dylan Shield goes to the tribunal in what shapes as a test case. All that and more right after this.
Places it inside 50. King! Oh, Ben King! One of the marks of the year. I thought he'd gone too early, and he's just hung and hung and hung.
Give him a smile, Dimmer. That is unbelievable.
Laverty. Wow, that is upended. Let's hope he's okay. That's a dangerous position to be in.
O'Connor, you're free. It's a push into the pack. Mark O'Connor's free.
Luan Lual was in a really dangerous spot in the air.
Sets it up. Who's going to be the leaper? Darcy's down there. And Pearce gets forward. Any score and they lead. A goal. Alex Pearce. Wow. The hero.
Well, hello and welcome. My name is Michael Gleeson, and joining us this week, Caroline Wilson and Libby Burch. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Gary.
Congratulations on your new book, Libby.
Yes.
Thanks,
And
Gary.
all the best for the season.
I know, starts this weekend, which is very exciting.
Thursday night.
Thursday night.
We will
Libby
get to that.
doesn't start Thursday night.
Well, the
The competition.
competition
Yes.
does.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
Correct. We will get to the games from this round, but there was a lot that happened since we last sat down. And we've had one coach sacked and one told his job was safe. What's the week told you about the Melbourne decision, do you think?
Well, I think Melbourne moved on Simon Goodwin because they thought that maybe Carlton would move on Michael Voss and they wanted to be in the market early. I also wonder if at the timing of it, given that the interim president did the deed in Brad Green and Steve Smith arrived home a few days later, who we think is going to be president by the end, or we know is going to be president by the end of the year. So did it have to be a Brad Green call? And did they time it also because they wanted to nab Nathan Buckley? I mean, Nathan Buckley has really emerged as a number one name, particularly because we've had both John Longmire and Adam Simpson say they don't want to coach next year. What they've really said, Libby, is that they don't want to coach Melbourne. They don't want to put that. Well, I mean, that's the only job going. But Tasmania say they want their coach by the middle of next year. So I think Nathan Buckley is very much in the frame for both jobs. I've written that he should take Tasmania. That's a separate one. If I had to have called it last weekend, I didn't think Goodwin was safe, but I would have thought Michael Voss was more likely to go. So it's definitely surprised me.
By last week, I thought Voss was going to survive. I thought just as a gut feel, I thought that there was more likely. Goodwin, I'm less surprised that I was very surprised by the timing. Just a few weeks out from the end of the season, and I find it odd that if that is and a few people have said the same thing to me that did they want to get the jump on coaches in case because there'll be other because of Carlton maybe moving. That to me was sort of strange. Like it's not a big jump that you're going to. If you're going after one of these experienced coaches, they're experienced enough to know there may or may not be another in the next week or so. There'll be another job available potentially. They're not going to just jump to Melbourne because they were in a couple of days earlier than another club. But
so and Carlton have gone against type. They tend to sack coaches before they.
I reckon that's precisely why they've done it.
Do you think would you say, Caro, it's Graham Wright that's given Vossi some more time, considering he hasn't seen him do his work yet?
I think
under the helm?
Yeah, I think it's Graham Wright having worked really closely in the whole year in footy and particularly in the last few months. We see him having these long, coffee meetings with Michael Voss. I think from those meetings has emerged the fact that he needs to make some other key changes in footy, and I'd be pretty nervous if I was Brad Lloyd. I also think that I know that Brian Cook has been eased out all year and hasn't been an influential CEO in the last year, but Brian Cook does not sack coaches. He is. I don't.
Neither does Graham Wright.
No,
Buckley was out of contract when they didn't re-sign him.
Well, he talked him out of he talked him out of it in the middle of the year. So culturally, that's just something that they don't do, and I think really they've decided that Voss needs to have the right framework around him and give him one more chance, which I would have argued maybe Simon Goodwin, I guess, has had a lot longer.
Voss, I think you're right. I think the message it sent to the competition was sort of like, hang on, we're calming things down here. Internally, it had the opposite effect because, okay, Voss's job's safe. Now everyone else is looking over their shoulder knowing full well there will be still significant change at the club. You can't just do nothing and roll into next year with the same personnel. So there will be still significant change. So therefore, you've got this uncertainty amongst the rest of them. Now, all the coaches had to be told, anyone out of contract had to be told by August 1 if they were going to be re-signed. And they told those coaches that were out of contract, some are out, some aren't, I'm not quite clear on which ones, that they couldn't offer them a job right now. But that didn't mean they wouldn't offer them a job. But therefore, because they couldn't say so right now, obviously you're free to go and find another job if you want one. But we may have something for you. We've just got so many other balls in the air with what we're doing and what we're looking to change and structure and who might be available and who isn't, that they weren't in a position to commit, which you completely understand at that point. The amount of change that I think they're going to have reasonable change. And I don't think, we're talking assistant coaches, I think I'd be very surprised if all of list and recruiting remained as it is.
Yep.
That doesn't mean people necessarily are walked out. It could mean a change of roles. It could be, but I would think that it'd be very surprising given the list situations there that stayed the same. On
assistant coaches, just from a player point of view, I think they're almost more important at your development rather than the head coach, in terms of you hardly speak to the head coach in season. Your main point of call is your assistant or your line coach, and they are responsible pretty much for how they coach you, because obviously the directive is coming from the head coach, but I would hardly speak to my head coach. So the role of that plays in the way a team performs, I think, is underrated. Yeah. The other one with Goodwin, I mean, it's still extraordinary 4 years after a flag and coming off an 83-point win that you lose your job. You'd normally think you're pretty safe. I think it was the lack of finals. Yeah.
I think he felt that way.
Yeah.
I think he was quite shocked. Well, it happened when it did, and really disappointed, obviously.
Well, I think that there's some fairness in that when you say the footy department was prepared to move on Oliver last year, and it was the board that wasn't happy with the return they got. So you stop a fairly significant decision, $1 million off your books and a first-round draft pick coming in because you don't think it's a good enough return, to then you therefore require them to stick with that player, and you're like, well, that's pretty significant change that the coaching and footy department want to make, and then when they're not able to make it, to see the consequence of that on the field this year too.
I think the other thing that surprised me, and this is nothing against Alan Richardson, the head of footy, but he has led that football operation through some pretty key mistakes, through some cultural issues that maybe the club weren't nearly tough enough on. I know he brought Laura Kane in at one point to talk to the senior players basically about off-field issues. And when we say off-field issues, it does involve, illicit drugs, etc. So did he do enough? Now he seems to be leading the search for the new coach.
Well, he sort of has to. And until he's not, he is the head of footy. He was also conspicuously the person not mentioned by Simon Goodwin when he praised from.
I think Simon Goodwin feels very let
and
down by Alan Richardson.
I'm surprised, or I won't be surprised if there's any more to go from the Ds. That it looks like they're having a little bit of a clean out in terms of a refreshing start. And someone like Choco Williams, you've mentioned Alan Richardson, but do they need a new voice for their players? Do they need a fresh start? The answer to that is yes.
Well, they're getting one.
Mark Williams is out of contract. The high performance boss is out of contract, Selwyn Griffith, and I know they've spoken to other clubs about Selwyn. They like him, they rate him, but they think they need a change. So it's going to. I think those two will definitely go. And as for the others, as for Alan Richardson, well, he seems to be also heading up the search for the new coach. So, and he went to the coach's house and sort of delivered the news. And I think, look, breaking up is hard to do. There's no nice way to end any relationship.
No,
but I think after the conversations Simon Goodwin had with his head of footy over the previous weekend, I think he was pretty shocked to see him there on Monday night. Yeah, well, I mean, you're the footy manager, though. You've got to be. It's ultimately also your responsibility, and you've got to give your advice to the board, and presumably the board also had their own opinion, and whether that
In the end, they were unanimous. So, and they were allowed to show a united front on that.
Sorry to interrupt you. The smartest thing anyone in Melbourne did last week was Troy Chaplin saying, I don't want the job. I'm not putting my hand up for the job, because caretaker coach is the most cursed position in footy. Yeah. Most caretaker coaches, or rarely,
unless
Paul Roos. Paul Roos is the exception to every rule, but and it's just a terrible job. It can often do you out of a job going forward, and it can end a coaching career. So I think if he does have coaching ambitions, and I think they're pretty happy with the work he was doing, or they wouldn't have put him in this role, I think he's done the right thing in ruling himself out.
Amusing sledge of Goodwin's to finally be unburdened and able to say what he actually thinks of going to Casey all the time.
I loved that. Yeah. It's so true, though.
Because no one wants to go out there.
No one wants to go to Casey.
No. But so we'll move on to the footy. And
I wonder if Nathan Buckley was listening.
Yeah. What did you make of did you feel it was a different look Melbourne at all? It was with Troy Chaplin caretaker. I mean, you often get that bounce from a team changing.
You do, but they were missing a lot of key players from their backline, so they're playing youth now, and I think it looks really good for the future for the Ds. But I think it said more about the Dogs. It was, I think they're feeling a little bit of the pressure. Every game from here on in is almost like an elimination final for them, and I think the way the Dogs play, we know that they are, I've got some stats here, but they've got the highest score accumulated from the top 9 across the season, but they've also got the highest score against in the top 9. So the way they play is this very much slingshot style of footy, where they don't really mind if the opposition's scoring as long as they're scoring more.
Yeah.
And I think that's dangerous coming into teams that are very, very good at defending, because as soon as you stop scoring, there's a problem.
I think you're absolutely right, and Blue Beverage has sort of spoken to that a bit. I think that it's an old Malcolm Blight sort of philosophy, isn't it? Well, if you kick 20, we'll kick 21. If you kick 21, we'll kick 22. But I think it's also recognition of what they have and don't have, and they don't have a strong backline, so they have to have it as, look, if they're going to score, we've just got to be able to, if we can't stop them scoring, we've just got to be more potent and really be able to punish them. And Sam Darcy didn't have a great day, but he had a great mark.
Match-saving mark, one of the marks of the year.
Yeah.
That was huge.
So brave, so pivotal at the time that it happened. I wonder, I mean, Melbourne did things that the coach has been lamenting all year, that he feels they can do but they haven't been doing. And the ball movement was transformative, really. Oh, they were pretty good the week before, but they were playing West Coast. So, and Clayton Oliver, showed something, but, I just wonder about, their midfield leaders weren't really the reason they played so well. They got so close and should have won.
I think.
Well, Petrarca had 5 touches or something for the first half, but I thought was really good in that last quarter. Like when they were really coming, he was good. He was breaking forward.
Viney.
Yeah.
Long-term deal. And the big thing for me is, will the new coach get a say on list management?
Depends on who that new coach is. If Buckley says he wants it, he will have an enormous say in what they do. And I would have thought,
interviews?
I would have thought if that was the case, Buckley would go in and say, well, more than likely, you take Oliver goes. He'll get Stephen Maybeck. You could put the heat on Stephen for a year. They've still got good players there. And it wouldn't surprise me if he went and tapped some of his old players that are out. Jamie Elliott sitting there out of contract, Brody Myercheck. You could go and pick up a veteran for a year or two. You'd have to give them 2, most likely. Now, I don't think they would go, but I think that's something that you'd look at if you're Buckley. I always read that the Tassie stuff at the start of the year, and we'll move on, but Buckley really putting his shingle out, I'm ready to go again. Was how I read it when he said it earlier in the year, and this is what's prompting now. But what did you make of the Dylan Shield report and for pushing into the pack and then causing basically the injury, potentially devastating injury for his own teammate? Well,
it'll be a very interesting test case at the tribunal. There's nothing in the rules that mentions teammate or opposition. Which Brad Scott seemed to be unaware of, which I thought was interesting. But coaches always stick up for their players when they get reported. I mean, I don't. Maybe a lot of coaches don't know that rule, but I only knew because I looked it up after it happened, and I had to talk about it on air on the weekend. I certainly had no idea. I mean, was the reckless act pushing the opponent into the pack, or was the reckless act the fact that the opponent hit the teammate?
Well, I would imagine the careless act was shoving someone
Yeah.
in the back, and you are the responsible for what flows from that, whether it's to a teammate or an opponent. So
who was the player who should have gone with Sam Lawler in the pre-season? I'll come back to you on that. But had they acted on that one?
They acted on the Ryan Mansell one.
They did.
On O'Connell, Saints O'Connell.
It was the West Coast
and it was
game.
3 matches that he got for that because O'Connell was badly concussed. And I'm probably in agreement with both of you in that the action is the one they want to stop. The pushing the player into the contest, not the result, which is the teammate being injured. It could have been anyone in that circumstance. But I believe, and I've been pretty vocal on this, even with the bump, the game is changing. There is this duty of care that we now have to have as players on field. We need to be making the decisions based on whether maybe an opponent's going to get injured by our actions. So we have to be thinking about that on field, which is a big change.
Exactly. And I think we've already done it. We say, we don't want to see this change in the game, but we've already seen players, when we say, do you want them jumping out the way? Yes, players do.
Yeah, players
Someone's
do.
on the ground. Someone hurdles a player on the ground so they don't take their head out or they don't, break their own leg. But they do jump out the way. And no one's saying that they're being timid or frightened
soft,
in that
yeah.
or soft,
Yeah.
but they're just not killing him. So.
Exactly, yeah. And I think you're exactly right. Even with some of the tackles now, I'm seeing, people letting go of the player that they're tackling at the last second to stop the resultant head on the ground. And that's what's been really important in our game this season.
I think that naturally you do think, well, which one is he actually charged with injuring, and who was he careless in hurting? But it's sort of both of them. Like
I think it's a week. I think it's a week.
Potential injury to
which is
the
not
opponent.
Great for Essendon because are they going to have enough players?
I don't know. They'll just keep adding. They'll keep adding.
And the captain, I think, was due to play a milestone game, but now he's having surgery on his hand.
Yeah.
So he may be back for the Carlton game, but who knows?
Well, they've got St Kilda Friday night in the double header. Fremantle Brisbane in Perth at 8:20.
Yeah. Look, it was a fascinating round of footy, and the Dogs really saved the season in terms of interest going into the next week because had they lost, the 8 would have been set. And the positional situation is fascinating. I mean, the fact that Brisbane could now still miss out, and I know this masthead, the Age has been really strong on this, and so they should have been. The fixture has been tough. I mean, I know Brisbane won the flag, but gee, they've had a
terrible draw.
Yeah, mind you, they just blew it on the weekend against Sydney.
They had some big outs.
They did have some big outs, and that was, of all the teams outside the 8 bar the Bulldogs, Sydney are the ones you'd be worried about, but still.
They're sitting, 14 wins and you're no longer guaranteed of getting in the 8. We've got, so the Bulldogs will play West Coast this week. That'll get them to 14. It'll come down to the Fremantle game in the last round. But
Fremantle at Marvel.
Yeah.
So, that's a very winnable game for the Western Bulldogs. It still amazes me that they're still only the 9th best team on the ladder, given the players they've got and some of the form they've showed. But I think one of you just talked about their defensive issues. I mean, they are issues, aren't they? They're going to...
Well, they are. You don't even have to have stars in defence, and I know that was the argument, but it's about the team structure of the defensive system. And I don't believe they've obviously chosen not to have that this year.
Yep.
It's all about scoring. But I think in finals, to win finals, they talk about premiership defence all the time. They don't have it.
Yeah, because if you're playing the best teams, and the best teams have good defences, and if they hold you up from scoring, then you're suddenly very vulnerable. All right, we'll take a break there. Come back and talk more about the Pies' free fall from the top.
We're online all the time. Just search Age Real Footy on Facebook or Twitter.
How do you explain some of the way players are playing, and if you don't believe in confidence or form? I mean, from an external point of view, you think it must be confidence, given the form?
So confidence is an outcome. Form's an outcome. We live in process. You judge us on outcomes. We judge ourselves on process. When you start to think outcome and expectation, then you're not doing. You're thinking. We want them to play. So we're confident we can turn those things around.
Well, welcome back, and another week, and the Pies were trounced. 64 points by Hawthorn. Never really looked in it after quarter time. And I would have thought you would say they're low on confidence, but apparently that doesn't apply, Cara.
Well, I'm interested in your thoughts, Libby. So just reminding everyone, we're with North Melbourne Premiership star Libby Burch. And Libby, the coach says that, he said in that post-match press conference, which was pretty interesting, a few interesting comments by Craig McRae, clearly very frustrated, really disappointed. He doesn't rate confidence or something along those lines.
Confidence changes on your next kick.
Yeah. I would disagree with Craig McRae there and say that confidence is built over multiple kicks that go into the right place. And at the moment, the Pies are not playing well. And when you've got that consistent evidence, and I believe they do now, 4 losses over the past 5 games, you don't have much confidence. And it's not coming back with one kick either. It'll come back over the course of 3 or 4 matches, but not over the next kick. So I think, I know I'm being a bit of a dualist there with what Craig McRae is saying, but I think the Pies have fallen off the cliff and I don't think they're coming back. And it's very hard to explain, but I've experienced this at the Melbourne Demons. We won, we didn't lose a game all year, and this was post-premiership, and it was about round 10 at halftime. Something happened, and I can't explain what, but Brisbane worked out how to beat us in round 10, and then we could not win another game in finals, or we just lost this facade of how to play.
Yeah.
So is it a facade at Collingwood?
I think there's a vibe about how they play, and I think that's intimidating to oppositions. But as soon as you lose that, which I feel like they may have over the last couple of weeks with some key losses, teams know that they can beat them now. And their efficiency going inside 50 has been so poor.
It's been pretty bad most of the year. The kicking to hitting up players inside 50 has been particularly in some of those losses, they go bomby and then it doesn't work. I mean, the game, the only thing I thought, if you were Collingwood glass half full, you'd say it was a 6-day break into a 5-day break, and you lose Jeremy Howe in the opening minute. One player walks off the ground and one stretch it off and the other comes back onto play out the game. Pure accident, but just in that moment you have a what is fairly significant shift in the game. But that comes up on top of a team that's playing horrendously. The backline completely lost connection. You've got when we talk about confidence, they were trying to give the ball to Dan Houston to get, and in the first term in particular, and he doesn't want the footy at the moment. He looks like he doesn't know what's going to happen.
You spoke about him last week, didn't you? What about the managing of players? I mean, the management sort of started weeks ago when they'd won enough games to, it looked like they were going to finish top of the ladder, and even ending up on the weekend with Nick Dacos starting on the bench and some of the decisions they've made around player management. Has that been...
I think you can flirt with form, and resting players, you can flirt with the form of your team, not necessarily with that player, but the way that your team connection and synergy works. If you're resting some players, other players come in. But I get the philosophy of it, and the reason why he's done that is because he's got some older players on the list that he needs to keep fresh. But in doing that, what's the pros and cons of not getting the synergy on field? So I agree with you, Cara. I think there's an element of having lost that over the last couple of weeks that compounds the impact that it's had on the field.
You also don't know whether there's a bit of locker room stuff in the background. Darcy Cameron was out. He signed a new contract, but he was out of. He was felt like he was being underpaid. He was still on his. He had a contract until the end of next year. Other players are still uncertain whether they're going to get another deal. Jamie Allen's got a 2-year one in front of him, Brady Mychik, and then they read about.
So do they really? Are they looking elsewhere?
No. But they're wanting another deal. They're wanting longer term. And the club at some point has to say, we can't have Dad's army. These are old players. So how many of them can we keep? But at the same time, you're also they're seeing money being put to Jack Silvani. And I'm sure they can't, even though they like them as teammates now, but they're also thinking Perryman and Houston both came in last year on around 900 each. And you're going, well, there's players that have been here and won premierships that aren't being offered that sort of money. And what's the performance like on the field? Yeah, I mean, Tom Mitchell came back in maybe because it was against his old team, but he looks done.
But it was still side bottom 350th. Yeah. And that's a massive game for the club and for him. And if you were playing for anyone on the night, if you wanted any more motivation, then it's still side bottom. So that's why I'm saying Craig McRae should be panicking, because that is not how you would represent not only the fans that he said that they didn't represent, but not how you represent Steel Sidebottom.
Their best, I think their best footy for the year was against Hawthorn, and some of their worst footy for the year was against Hawthorn. So the two switch. And Hawthorn, let's not also forget, they were fantastic.
They were great.
The conversation becomes a bit hijacked by Collingwood because the the top of the ladder is free falling.
It was a dominant performance after, and I know they had a longer break going into the game, but that was a really tough game over at the Adelaide Oval. And, with hindsight, they could have beaten Adelaide. And Adelaide, well, they didn't look terrific on the weekend, but I think we all agree they're probably the best team going around at the moment. So we all underrated Hawthorn a bit, I think.
Yeah, but, like Lloyd Meek towed up Darcy Cameron. They're getting goals from these guys, marking on the goal line, unable to spoil. They were terrific. And
Watson and Ginnivan just demanding
So
that
good.
big stage. I mean, they can drive you nuts, but gee, they can be damaging.
But they also needed a big win like that too against one of the top 8 teams. It was a bit of a query how they can go against the 8. They're beating other teams. That was a really big win for the Hawks, and they particularly this time of year, you then carry that momentum into. We know that from last year how significant the momentum is, particularly for them running into the finals. To get that sort of performance and then fly in was good. And interestingly now, so you mentioned Adelaide. I thought West Coast were really, really good. I mean, it was in Perth, but they were really good, and it felt like Adelaide would still do enough to win. But for a period there, first was going to get knocked off by 18th.
Which has never happened.
Never.
Look, they've taken their time, West Coast, and again, it just staggers me that they're even trying to get a priority pick. I just think it's laughable, and I'm absolutely certain it won't happen. But if they end up getting heavy compensation as a result through some trade, which it looks like is going to happen, that'll be really disappointing too.
I think one that wouldn't even surprise me if it comes in for this year, because I think it's just a smart and obvious idea. But the way the compensation works on free agents is that it's a net result. So you lose one, but you pick one up. They cancel each other out. So Oscar Allen, I think one of the changes they could make is to shift that for the bottom teams. So if you're a West Coast and you lose Oscar Allen, and you get a compensation pick for that, which could end up being pick 2, then that shouldn't be diluted by the fact that you should be able to then chase Brandon Starcevic, for instance, who's out of contract they're interested in, and bring him in without it affecting your compensation. The same as Carlton, lose the 2DK. They can't be in the market for a free agent of their own, lest it affect their compensation pick. That's crazy. I mean, and Silvani going as well, potentially. So you've got 2 players potentially going out, and you don't want to offset that by bringing someone in. Well, that's not how the system should work. You shouldn't punish. You should empower the lower team to be able to access that market without it affecting them. And I think Greg Swan could do that as soon as this year. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And I think that'd be a worthwhile change. I think they'd be in the market. Carlton aren't that. I think they feel like they can find some players, even some free agents to bring in and those depth players, and that shouldn't affect what happens with TDK. What did you make of the Freo Port game?
Oh, look, I really hope Ken Hinkley gets a win before he hangs up the boots. I mean, this is going to end up being almost his worst season, which is, so disappointing. Port were wonderful. I mean, I was really interested in, just as a snapshot from the game, in Pete Ryan's 4 points column, which he did for you this week, the comment about the umpire Stevens getting what could have been a concussion late in the game after being hit by Connor Rosie, and then making a couple of dubious decisions after nobody actually checked him for concussion in what was I don't know if you read that piece,
I did,
in what was a really close game.
Yeah.
Port were great. Freo had to win, and yet, Freo could end up missing out because I still don't trust them. And everything I saw on the weekend explains why we don't trust them.
No, are they sitting, what are they, 4th or 5th now? So
they've got the Bulldogs at Marvel in the last game. They don't have a great run home. So Freo could be the team that misses out. And I thought Port were pretty impressive. And Zach Butters, I mean, I know they want Nazaya Wanganeen Malira, but it could cost them Zach Butters. I don't know if I'd be doing that one.
Ken's really fascinating to me. Like, you would think that he's the sort of bloke that Carlton would be talking to come in as footy director to work with Voss, the bloke he used to play, used to coach with. His own personal circumstances, though, half his family's now, virtually all his family's over in Adelaide now, and he's got another grandkid on the way. But there's, there'd be teams looking at him like that. Brisbane, if would love him to come up, I think, or he'd love to go there if it was, that sort of Danny Daly role. If Danny wasn't there,
I think they've wasted a year, Port. I hate to say it, but look, obviously Ken would have required a payout because of the contract he had. I understand why they made a preliminary final, for heaven's sake, last year, and it wasn't like they were, well, it was a terrible loss to Sydney, but it wasn't the world's worst. It wasn't a John Longmire style loss in the grand final. Okay, they kept him. They made the succession announcement. It hasn't worked, Libby.
No, well, I think a lot of the talk at the start of the year was, are the players confused? Who are they listening to? That was most of the discussion. Who are they playing for? And to be honest, I probably would have thought the same thing. Who am I playing for? Who do I need to impress? Who's the relationship I need to build with going forward? And just a bit of a muddled year. Like, what are we doing? Like, there's no clear direction. We're sort of just sitting on the fence with this. We're not.
Well, I reckon the big thing was it says we're having a long-term view with coaching, and you sort of think, well, we've spent the summer saying we're all in for this year. We're going for a prelim. We're going in. We're going to win the flag. But then we're like, yeah, we're looking ahead already. It's a new era. The new era starting before the season begins.
That's what I mean about the muddled messaging.
Yeah.
It's like, we're looking ahead, but then we're also trying to win. You can't have both.
And also Travis Boak getting another year. He's been one of my favourite players well over a decade. But, he didn't end last season on a great note, and maybe it would have been the chance to give someone else a go. There's been a couple of things that just haven't worked out for Paul.
I reckon that, though, is relevant to we're all in, we're going for a flag again next year, and we re-sign, the club's best player, one of the club's ever players, and because we think we're right there. Now, if you're going with a new coach and a new generation, you probably would have made that call last year on him. He's been good this year. He was really good the other night. So I think he's still playing good footy. So he's at least not going out badly. And I think that he's still got something to offer. We'll take a break there. We'll come back and talk AFLW.
Get access to every episode as it drops. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
With number 2, Libby Birch.
That's 3, Libby.
Oh, thank you. Hug? Yeah. A 3rd premiership medallion for Libby Burch.
Well, welcome back, and it won't be straight into quick questions. We're having a different final segment this week with a preview of the AFLW season to come, and Libby, no better person to have here to talk about it than having won your 3rd AFLW Premiership medal at North last year. How confident of a 4th?
Well, I think you are confident because there's a level of evidence behind what you did last year. Going undefeated is a really, really tough challenge, and we accomplished that. But in saying that, you start the year again and there are so many incredible sides, and AFLW is just going from strength to strength. And we're so lucky to have Darren Crocker, who I feel is one of the best coaches in the competition at just keeping you really level-headed. I think a few weeks after we won the premiership, he was just saying, all right, next year now, year, let's focus on next year. But we've come back fitter and stronger than ever. The whole premiership hangover is an interesting psyche in terms of being hunted and versus being the hunters. And I've done it twice, and it's a really hard position to be in. The pressure's all on you. Everyone's expecting you to win. And everyone comes having analysed your game plan to an absolute T over the preseason to try and make sure they can beat you the following year. But I think what's going to be exciting this year is we've got these teams that are going to be rising. Adelaide, Brisbane, we know that they're really, really good sides. They have been for a long time. But the Hawks are another one that I think they didn't have the best final series last year, but they are a really, really creative side, much like their AFL side, really. They play exactly like that, fast, speed and creatively. I think the D's are one to watch this year. And the reason why I say that is because they've done a power of work over the off-season, but they finished quite low on the ladder last year. And because you only play 12 rounds, what happens with the fixture is they sort of teeter it to make sure that the next year you're not playing the top 6 to 8 sides. So they've got an easier fixture because of their placing last year. So they could potentially go through this season undefeated and be on the top of the ladder. So what's interesting is you have to win every game in AFLW because there's only 12 rounds.
Yeah.
Who's a player to watch for those of us who could burst onto the scene this year or will come of age this year?
Yeah, well, I absolutely love our youngsters that are coming through. They are so ready-made footballers. When you think back 10 years, they were, in elite junior comps at that stage. So Ash Centra from Collingwood, she is a weapon. Havana Harris from Gold Coast, she's a 182 centimetre ruck, midfielder, forward, can be anything. There's so much speed and strength in these athletes now that have been through a proper system for a good 10 years, Caro, which is really, really exciting for the competition. And for players like me who are getting old and slow, we're getting nervous about the youth coming through because it's absolutely spectacular.
So this season, it's not an AFLW season if there aren't some sort of significant changes, whether it's to format or rules. There are more changes to the rules this year. Just talk us through those and what the experience so far in the pre-season has been for how that's playing out.
I love the changes. So basically the AFL or the game wants us to have more speed on the game and more scoring, or more turnovers, which creates more scoring. So at the moment, and what we've seen during practice matches, is the holding the ball rule is super tight. So if you take possession of the footy, you have to be seen getting it out. If you are just succumbing to the tackle, it's holding the ball, and they are so tight on this. In fact, I'm surprised at the lack of stoppages there is now to be able to set up as a defender behind the ball. You just can't, because basically if you get the ball, you have to get it out, and you have to get it out with the appropriate disposal. Again, otherwise it's holding the ball. The other change that I've really liked is the around the ground stoppages with the rucks. The umpire will throw the ball up regardless of if the rucks are in the area. No. So the rucks could be, 100 metres away. You have to nominate. Yeah. But the rucks could be 100 metres away, and if no one nominates, the ball gets thrown up, and it's a chance for the game to be faster, and we're not waiting for rucks to get to contests. And I just think there's going to be more end-to-end goals, and I've already experienced it as a defender, but there's less time to set up because there's no repeat stoppages, as the umpires are just scoring, holding the ball.
So given there's so much emphasis on scoring and speed, and I know when, the Walter Lee and the AFL presented to the CEOs last month, they even compared the amount of clangers in the men's game to the women's game, while obviously understanding the differences anyway. Do you feel, as one of the leaders of the competition, pressure on the spectacle, and how do you balance the pressure on the spectacle with the pressure of winning?
I think that's a great question, and yes, we do. We do feel pressure on us and how we produce on the footy field. And I'm not sure that AFL men's players would feel the same, but I think it's more pivotal for us because we are always fighting for eyeballs. We're fighting for positivity around our great game and where we're heading. But we're also fighting for the next, CBA or the next TV deal, or we want people to love our game, and that adds pressure to how we perform, as well as wanting to win a game of footy as well. At the end of the day, I think I can now confidently say that this is an elite competition, and that we no longer need to worry about that, Caro, because I know that every single team in our competition is putting the work in to be elite on the field.
So you don't need to worry about the spectacle, you
no,
mean?
Because I think
you do need to worry about it, losing $50 million a year.
Well, some people would say that's what is costing the game.
But I don't worry.
Okay.
I trust.
But you're right. It is, yeah.
I trust our spectacle more than ever now because I know what the competition's put into making us more elite full-time athletes.
No, I agree. What I was going to say is that's the contradiction is that the spectacle's better, but the following and the broadcast and the numbers aren't corresponding. So it's not the game this is a bit of a different
This is
departure.
not a visual medium we're doing, but I wish people could see the look that Libby just gave you,
but
Michael.
I'm just saying it's the other structural questions around the game that are also hampering that, whether it's the timing of the season and those, whether doubleheaders where you're playing.
Yes, but as players we can probably control only one thing, and that's our preparation towards the season and how we approach it. And the rest is up to the AFL and our fans that turn up and watch us.
Yeah.
And I think one of the messages I had for anyone that hasn't converted to AFLW or hasn't watched a game or turned off a couple of seasons ago is give it another chance. And you'll see how far we've come and how far this competition's come. And if your men's teams are out of the finals, you know, your footy dream's not over. Your footy dream's not over. But yeah, I am so, like, I've been there since day dot. And I know back in 2017, there was cross-coders. There was people that couldn't kick. I couldn't kick. God, I couldn't kick because I'd come from netball. But now we have had 10 years of these young girls picking up a footy since they were, 5, 6, 7, 8 that have learnt the game just as any male would have. And they are born and bred footballers. And it is football you want to watch. And I urge everyone to have a look this season.
I agree with that. And I reckon it's similar to when you talk about do the men's have to do the same, it's more similar to the northern teams. Like the Gold Coast and GWS in particular are as mindful of what type of game do we play to attract, to appeal to this market. We need eyeballs watching us.
Yes, but I still don't think the pressure is the same.
No, it's not the same, but it's more akin to it.
I'm interested in where you stand on State of Origin, or if there is an extra game or some form of representative football, what you think?
Yeah, I think it's a really cool idea. I even like the idea of we've got so many Irish players that light up our competition. It would obviously be hard to get them out because they sometimes come out late in the year because of their competitions. But I love that. I think bringing a little edge to the game that we don't see across the mediums of football is cool, and it gives another spectacle of women's football that's short and snappy over a state of origin game or series. I think it's a chance for fans to connect with more players as well.
Yeah, and to see the game at its elite best, because there's never been any question about the standard of the finals and the grand final in particular. So I just can't understand the minute was it 2 years ago that an NRLW state of origin game outrated an AFL game on a Thursday night. I don't understand why the AFL weren't thinking about it then and why they've lagged so much in doing it.
No, I agree. And we discussed this previously on the thing about when that whole idea of the changing the men's fixture and looking at, round robin things and the thing in the middle of the season, we raised that idea. Well, having an AFL, whether it was a bye round where you have the AFLW state of origin in that middle of the year period. But that still comes back to that first structural point that I was raising before, is getting the actual structure of the competition right, the timing of when the season is, how many games you're playing and when they are, and fitting it in to then maximise in some of those rounds, whether it's you have one state of origin in the middle of the year in that bye round, you have one in the week before the between the finals, the end of the AFL men's home and away season in the finals, to really push that showcasing of the game.
Yep, and gather round. And I know, again, the timing's wrong, but this is a celebration of footy across Australia. Why the hell haven't women been given a role in that?
Yeah, you're
it's extraordinary to me.
Yeah, well, the NRL thing, it was easier to do because the season was sitting in with the men's season. I don't think they've ever got the timing of the season right. So...
Well, Libby can't do anything about that.
No. But keep playing well and winning premierships, which is doing very well. That's all we've got time for this week. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Thanks also to Channel 7 and Fox Footy for the audio we've used in this episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so via email, realfootypod@theage.com.au. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. And the Expert Tips podcast will be back on Thursday. We'll catch you there.